Between 2007 and 2011, the world experienced three catastrophic shocks. Do you remember the 2007 financial crisis? What about the 2010 BP oil spill? Or the 2011 Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster? I was shocked and horrified by these disasters. I was like, what is going on here? And I sought to explain, understand, and maybe even help prevent these kinds of disasters from reoccurring. But what I discovered is that risk is encoded into our social and technical systems, especially our financial and energy systems. Risk is encoded through the pursuit of high-risk technologies whose potential for catastrophic failure is known, but is regarded as a low probability event. And of course, it turns out to be not so low probability. Risk is also encoded in two close regulatory relationships, often described as revolving door relationships. And finally, risk is encoded in poor crisis planning, and that leads to poor crisis management, as I illustrate in my case studies, beginning with the 2007 financial crisis. Well, you probably know that the financial system that underpins the global economy, it thrives on risk and volatility, and it produces these crises. And each of them leads to more economic polarization and more centralized decision-making power. Perhaps you recall in the run-up to the financial crisis in 2007, when Greenspan said he was concerned that risk was no longer regarded as risky, at least as it had been in times past. And that's because risk-seeking permeated organizational cultures and regulatory relationships. Perhaps you recall that financial VP who infamously described selling Frankensteinian financial products that were nothing more than intellectual masturbation to naive orphans and widows. And yet, the financial press emphasized anonymized complexity as causing the disaster, as did regulators. Perhaps for this reason, there were few criminal prosecutions. And to this day, Dodd-Frank is currently being deregulated. I suspect another financial crisis is right around the corner. What about the world's energy systems? They also encode social and technical risk. The World Energy Outlook for 2040 projects that coal, oil, natural gas, and nuclear are going to continue to predominate. But these are non-renewable technologies, and they are very hazardous for human health and the environment, as the BP oil spill illustrates. It also illustrates technological reach and oil's resource limits. Why else would BP have been drilling in the Gulf if oil was otherwise easily accessible? BP had a poor industrial safety record. It hadn't planned for a crisis in the Gulf, and it hadn't adopted the available safety equipment such as the blowout preventer. It managed the crisis using Corexit, which increased the toxicity of the oil. BP did not have a good safety record, but it did have a close relationship with regulators, according to an Interior Department report. In the end, BP was disciplined more harshly than the financial firms, but it closed its renewable headquarters in 2009, and it only projects nominal growth in renewables towards 2040. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster. That disaster involved 3 nuclear meltdowns. Hundreds of thousands of people were evacuated, and the plant is unmitigated to this day. Whistleblowers had raised concerns about the GE reactor design at Daiichi and elsewhere since the 1970s. And TEPCO, the plant operator, it knew that the seawall was inadequate. It knew that backup generators could be flooded. And it knew that there were problems with spent fuel storage at the site. TEPCO hadn't planned adequately for a crisis, and that led to chaotic evacuations. Globally, the relationship between nuclear and regulators is described as a global nuclear village. Perhaps it is for this reason that a former nuclear regulator has stated he sees no place for nuclear in a Green New Deal. Why is that? It's because catastrophically risky technologies pursued by risky industries in contexts of low accountability, they will produce crises. And the effects, well, they get shifted or externalized to you and to me. But these systems of organized irresponsibility are not inevitable. They are a result of human decision-making and value prioritization. We do not have to fail. We know how to make good risk decisions. We need to demand it, and then all of us need to help enable it, because our survival depends upon it. And that is why I am talking back today. Thank you.